you would have heard the terms hotly contested. Yes. That's been said so many times in news bulletins and newspapers. And honestly, when you look at the run-in and everything that is happening with the build-up to these elections, hotly contested, without, of course, the pun, considering everything that's happening right now with the main opposition party, these certainly are hotly contested. But of course, we're not going to be doing this alone, are we? You know, it's going to be a series of episodes of X Marks the Spot, the podcast, and who better to start it off than with the one and only Beanie Man.
To the eNCA family, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be on a podcast. It's in many ways my roots, even before radio, so I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to wear this for 10 more seconds so people know who I am. Yeah. It's actually so funny. Most people have to wear a mask if they're a public figure out in public to not be recognized. I just need to take these off. I can't walk through Rosebank Mall like this, but if I take them off, no one knows who I am. So really? Yeah, it's a reverse disguise.
And how's things been? How's the show going?
I'm actually doing this right now.
Yeah?
There we go.
The eNCA one's right there.
Yeah, I'll do this for 10 seconds too, and then we'll go. It's been lovely. So as of this taping, we've done 2 episodes. Audience has been wonderful. Response has been good. Ratings have been cute. So long may it last.
Love that for you.
I mean, let's just actually start there. Some of the things that you've been unpacking, you know, on the Dan Quarter show, what you've been looking at, considering that we are somewhat just 3 weeks to go to the elections. It's really just now. But what have you been unpacking? The first 2 shows, what are you zoning in on? And I mean, it's obvious. Some of the things are what's in the news, you know, you're looking at the burning of the flag and the likes, but what have you allowed the viewers to see that perhaps the ordinary bulletin wouldn't?
So the first thing that we've done is a Who on Earth Are We Going to Vote For series, because people have been begging eNCA and me to tell them who to vote for, which I will never do because I at this point don't know at all, and that's truthful and honest. But what people really want to know is, you know, South Africa is such an overwhelming place. The tagline of our show is South Africa is a movie, welcome to the watch party, because that's what it is. It's a watch party. I'm not a journalist. We're just watching this movie and like cringing and crying and shrieking with laughter together. Sometimes South Africa is a bit more, you know, the Avengers, and sometimes it's a bit more Madam Web, and we need to find somewhere in the middle. So what we've done on the Who We're Going to Vote For series is we dedicate a deep dive to each of the big players in the coming elections. So it's the good, the bad, and the future. So essentially, if you're considering voting for any party but just don't know what's important to consider or what's been going on, you can watch a 12-minute piece and you just kind of know everything that you need to know. So we happened to do the DA last night. We did the ANC the night before. Next week, as of this taping, we're doing the EFF and MK. And then the other big piece we've done on our very first show is talking about Jacob Zuma, because his MK party has like absolutely shaken South African politics to its core, and the Constitutional Court is going to decide in the next few days whether or not he can be a member of Parliament. So it was a really big deal. We had to talk about it.
I think that's so relevant, because every time I talk about the upcoming elections to young people, the question is always, I want to vote, but who am I supposed to vote for? Or who should I vote for? There's been a lot of talk around voter apathy and how or what the appetite of young people is. I love that you do news, but you do it in a way that young people can gravitate towards it. When you're engaging with young people on social media platforms, what are they saying about the upcoming election?
A lot of things, but I do think a lot about how social media with politics often distorts what is really going on in a country, because you will know that the commenters on a WhatsApp line on a radio show like my old one are often not the normal person. They're the up here or the down here people. And when it comes to politics, often the people who are commenting are hardcore committed disciples of a party already. So they're not necessarily representative either. And I was called a seller. I've been accused of being on the payroll of everybody in this country in the last 6 months for daring to criticize anybody, because there's this expectation that you need to pick your tribe and you just need to be in your tribe. And particularly when a white boy criticizes the DA, he's a race traitor, he's chosen the other side, and I'm like, well, you're acknowledging your racism by thinking that there are sides based on skin color. That's an apartheid mentality. But what young people have really been talking about at the moment is that they're not apathetic, they just feel hopeless. They feel defeated. Because if your entire lived experience, say I'm 30, I was born 6 months before the 1994 election that launched the democratic South Africa, all that me and my generation and younger have known is government sucks, things don't work, things are decaying, money is stolen, opposition sucks, We hate everyone. What are we supposed to do now? And no one's providing anything. So when people say, oh, young people aren't interested in politics, that's nonsense. It's just no political party's given them a reason to be invested, because no one or most young people don't believe that any of the options will deliver change for them. And so that's what young people are looking for. And when people say, oh, I don't know who to vote for, they're saying, I'm looking. They're saying, I'm looking, but everyone's... I nearly swore. Sorry. When I'm not on TV, I'm filthy. But yeah, they're going, someone give me an inspiration, you know?
And you look at, just since the registration of November last year, there's been an uptick of about just over 1 million new, names on the electorate. So it's true what you're saying, that it's not that we are apathetic. It's just that who am I going to vote for? I'm going to literally give my vote to a random new party that is not even going to make it into... Do you even know who you're going to vote for? You've got 3 weeks.
I have a few options. But my concern is, when listening to these various political parties' manifestos, they all sound the same. No one is giving us something different.
You've got one who's promising you, well, not at least promising you, but you've got one who's trying to, emotionally blackmail you into, we gave you freedom. You've got another one who says the one that gave you freedom has actually destroyed you for 30 years. And then you've got the others who are saying that, well, they're all nonsense because they're sitting in parliament not really doing anything. But then somebody said something important, is it's all good and well to blame, the incumbent ruling party. But what are the others that have been in parliament, that have been part of policy making and law making? What have they done to at least try, however little it may be, to change the course? So when you're sitting there, you're watching Parliament TV, however much of it you can watch, because sometimes it deteriorates.
I don't know, it can be extremely entertaining. We've got one of the pure entertainment value, funniest political systems in the world. People are hysterical, they got banter.
It's not helping though when it comes to 21 days to go to casting your vote, and you are looking at parties that are disruptive for whatever reasons they may be, valid or not, but you're also looking at parties that are not really saying anything. You've listened to Sona after Sona, budget speech after budget speech, that is not really telling you anything. As a student, what are you saying about my education? NSFAS, as somebody who's into their retirement age, what are you saying about grant increases? So it's all really just hanging up in the air.
Yeah, and not just what are you saying, what have you actively done so far to show me and prove to me as a voter that I should make my X next to your name or your party's name.
But that makes this election so exciting, right? Because it's fundamentally going to be different. No matter what happens, South Africa after the 29th of May is not going to be the same anymore. We're not going to have a ruling party with such a huge majority that they can basically flip us the bird and beat us up on the side of the N1 when they feel like it. You know what I mean? Because, and this is the thing, everyone's like, oh, democracy doesn't work. No, that's not true. Uncompetitive democracies don't work. If a party has so much support that they don't need to perform to stay in power, then they won't perform. But the second a party may not get 50+1, then they need to perform. And we've seen that. Yo, guys, the pie in the sky we've been sold in the last month. Yo, that we're going to give you this, and we're going to make this free, and this is going to happen.
All talk, but where's the action?
And wow, guys, isn't load shedding gone nice? I feel drunk, I feel greedy, I feel fat, I feel full by all the power that we get. I don't have to think of charging my devices the night before. And we all know, unless I'm very surprised, that on the 30th of May, we're going to suffer a national solar eclipse where the power's going to go out. They're going to snuff out the candles in our homes. They're going to turn off our phones. But look, they're responding to the motivation of accountability through a democratic system. So people say, oh, democracy doesn't work. It's not true. Competitive democracies work, and this might be our first one.
40% average in the 6 provinces that the ruling party is still popular. That's where they're sitting, at about 35 to 41%. This is according to Markdata. And the 3,022 representative households that they've gone and spoken to, which, we were actually having this conversation before we went on to say that you don't get that larger number of polling, right? So you're looking at about 3,000 representative households, one-on-one engagements also, which actually gives you the true essence of how people feel. You talk about this being the most competitive elections we'll ever have. It takes us to potentially a coalition government. Are we the kind of country that's ready for a coalition government?
No. Now, Yes, in future. So the coalitions have been absolutely shocking at local government level in the last 2 years. But we do need to remember that it is new for South Africa, coalitions, and all of the parties are jostling to try and make it look like they're winning at any one moment. In many ways, I feel like in terms of coalitions, we're an immature democratic system, and we will learn how to do it. Some coalitions have worked, some coalitions haven't. But at every opportunity where a party gets a chance to do something in government, again, we're seeing more. Rather than the ANC just being able to do what they want and all the opposition can do is cloud and like throw voice. Instead, at these moments, we have smaller parties getting into coalitions and really trying, like the IFP and the DA, for example, in KZN, and trying to make a good difference, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And then besides independent voters, independent candidates rather being included this year, there's been the introduction of something called the MK Party, which has caused a lot of stir, a lot of conversation, ruffled the feathers of the ANC a little bit.
They're doing that, but they've also got a bit of infighting. So like, I mean, the thing is, you are looking to be an alternative, but then you're beating each other up within your own party. You don't even know who the leader is. You've got a guy that was not supposed to be the leader who came in and took over from the guy that actually founded the... What is happening?
But I mean, we know that that's a one-man party, right? I mean, the fact that Jabulani Khumalo, who founded the party, got kicked out on a weekend, like, you know, Jacob Zuma loves his weekend specials. Do you remember Des Van Rooyen, the one-night stand finance minister? Fabulous guy that was. But I mean, he kicked Jabulani Khumalo out, and then just this weekend, Jabulani Khumalo was campaigning for the ANC in I think Soweto, somewhere in Gauteng. So it does show you that we have a political class which is willing to change its hats or its outfits to find another job. But I think the thing about the MK Party that is truly remarkable is that it has changed the potential for this election. We were wondering if the ANC would maybe get 50. Now we're wondering if they're going to get 40%. And the other thing that I think has gone underreported is that, yes, in by-elections and polling in KwaZulu-Natal, MK has taken votes off of the ANC and the IFP, but they have eviscerated the economic freedom fighters in KZN. And the EFF's big growth point in 2019, 2021, but particularly 2019, was in KwaZulu-Natal. There's something about Jacob Zuma's proposal or his re-emergence that makes potential EFF voters go, no, that's actually who we really wanted. That's who we really wanted. And the problem that the EFF has is a very similar problem to what the DA had in 2019, where they were selling themselves as a potential government in waiting, right? But to be a potential government in waiting, in optics, you need to be growing every single election. You need to be increasing your voter base. The DA went backwards 500,000 people in 2019. Suddenly, they just look like a flatlining party. And if the EFF flatlines this election because of MK, Julius Malema's whole I'm the king on the way is in a lot of trouble.
But then that makes it interesting, because are you going to really back somebody? And it shouldn't sound as though it's ageism, because understandably in the African political landscape, age really doesn't matter. But are you really going to back somebody who has been of ill health, who you know, a lot of people have said he needs to step away, and I speak of Msholozi Jacob Zuma, who, you know, is by the next elections would be closer to 90. You know, do you really want to back that instead of somebody who is still in his 40s, though?
I think a lot of people just have a glowing recollection of Zuma's years in power, and we now know that there was state capture and corruption, and he used a lot of resources now to make his administration look good, which then left the next administration super short. We know that. But I think in many ways people go, maybe if he came back for just 5 years, kind of like with Biden or Trump in America, those 5 years could be good.
You speak of Jacob Zuma being 90 come the next elections, but a lot of people are saying that most of the people in power in government are over the retirement age. Another question that's being asked is, where are the young people? Yes, the voter apathy seems to be increasing with regards to young people, but we need young leadership. We need young people to step into power. We need young people to be the people that make the decisions for us. But do we have enough young leaders? Are enough young people stepping up to the plate?
I think, if anything, we need to focus on the youth league structures of all these different parties. I'm not hearing anything from any of the youth league structures. Recently, we had the ANC Youth League itself, you know, getting a revamp and a rehaul and getting new leadership, but I've not heard anything. And I don't think a lot of young people, especially in universities, even know who are the leaders of all of these, these youth organizations. But I do know, for example, EFF does have somewhat of a presence in universities. Whether they're using that presence to their advantage You're talking about how, in KZN, for example, they've lost a great deal of ground. Are they using their youth structures to their advantage?
Well, I think there's a really interesting moment because the ANC Youth League is supposed to be this extremely powerful, iconic organization. But I mean, ANC Youth League youth is like 35 to 50. Like, it's like, they're not youth. The ANC Youth League leaders are in their 40s. When Fikile Mbalula idiotically said the quiet part out loud and was like, yes, we did go to parliament and we did call a swimming pool a fire pool, and it was so embarrassing. He said it on tape in front of the media microphones a little while ago. Gwede Mantashe came out and said, oh, you know, but he's still like kind of new to politics. Sometimes we just need to go and take the new kids aside and tell them how to handle this. Fikile Mbalula is 55. He's been ANC high-up structures for more than 10 years, but no, he's fresh. So we do have a problem with that. But that being said, there are a handful of political parties that do make a specific effort to get young people into high positions of power. I'm not talking about Chris Papas types, because he has got to a premier-elect position in KZN with the DA because he's performed so well as mayor of Ngeni. But I'm more talking about how parties like Rise Mzansi and parties like the DA make a specific effort, and the EFF until recently with Naledi Chirwa, to try and put younger people in positions of power.
Let's look at, you bring up Raz Mzansi, which for me is quite interesting. Raz Mzansi, Shiluba, ATM, Bossa, what are these guys giving us? I mean, we're going to be talking until we're pink in our faces about, the ANC, the DA, the EFF, and I suppose the IFP, but what are these newcomers giving us? Do we even, because I would expect you would have had conversation aplenty in the build-up to the elections with these guys, and when you're sitting and you're listening to them talk to you in these interviews,
it's a lot of promising. It's a lot of promising. There's very little talk on action that's been applied and things that have been implemented already. That's just how it's been.
A job in every house, does that make sense really? Is that something really Musi can promise, should be promising?
How do you implement that? That's the thing. How do you implement it? It's all good and well to say, I'm going to do this. But what about implementation? How do you go about that?
So, I mean, a lot of these new political parties sound like copy-paste or light versions, drink light versions or low-calorie versions of other parties. I've been lucky enough to interview a bunch of them, and they do have some interesting ideas, but I do worry about your communication with the public. Like, if you dig into a manifesto, it kind of feels like, you guys ever watch the movie Holes? Long time ago, where they had to dig those holes every single day. Some of those manifestos, the EFF's one is 280 pages. It's like it was designed not to be read. So they can just tell us whatever they feel like because they reckon we haven't read it. But the electioneering strategies are not very good. Like, everyone's promised a job in every home. Every party has for 30 years. But we'd much rather hear exactly what policies will be put in place. I will say that Rise Mzansi has been interesting in the way that they've done their election campaign, because they have not done the big rally stunt thing. They've not done the provocative interview thing. On their anniversary day and on Freedom Day and other days, they are just going into communities and doing soup kitchens or cleaning up communities and stuff. They're doing this very proactive style of activist politics, which no other party has really done, where they're going, we're just going to serve as much as we possibly can. And while it may not get huge attention straight away, they've always said that their first target is to do well in the local government elections in 27 or 26. And so what they're trying to do now is to prove, yes, we're not in power. So we can't show you what we did as mayor somewhere. But let's show you what we do every day. We clean up streets, we do soup kitchens, we try to help in like recruitment centers, we write CVs. And I would love for that, I'm not saying I'm supporting Rise, but I'd love for that to become the new way South African parties do politics. Go into a community, make a difference, try and offer something more than words on a page.
They're also very focused on the universities and what the kids in universities are experiencing. I had the youth convener of Rise Mzansi in studio with me some time ago, and he was very focused on the ill treatment of university students with regards to NSFAS, with regards to accommodation, with regards to not having anything to eat. So I know that they are very vocal when it comes to those issues, and I think it can be commended, because finally there's someone who's speaking up and actually putting action behind what they're saying.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, to your point earlier, they may only get a couple of percent. There's a very big difference between a couple of percent of brand new people rather than a couple of percent to like a COPE type offshoot of a party that already exists, because these oaks are brand new. So it's kind of exciting.
We talk about policy implementation. One of the things I think I've not really heard anything of any substance that is convincing also is the dealing with crime. You know, we've got a lot of that happening, and we are hearing lieutenant generals, police commissioners of different provinces saying that we will have it on lock. KZN is a hotbed of violence, you know, exactly, because we've got our senior reporter at eNCA, Sibamandla Goke, right now crisscrossing KZN. He has interviewed many a person in that province over the years, talking crime and political killings. It's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, I said on the show last night that I don't think SAPS could catch a cold at this point. SAPS couldn't catch COVID. Like, really, they are not good at their jobs. And very, very often we hear from, like, I interviewed Justice Minister Ronald Lamola a little while ago, and we hear from the man with that ludicrous hat, Becky Taylor. It's like Pinky and the Brain, guys. It's like he never takes it off. Like, you could be doing something else. But anyway, that's just me. But we keep hearing them say, oh, you know, we're going to get a generator in a court, or we're going to create a specialist court or whatever. But fundamentally, things are not changing. Like, you know, policies to try and reduce femicide, the gender-based violence against women and children continue to fail. Communities are not safe. And it's funny, particularly in the Western Cape, where people talk about gangsterism and how terrible and dangerous places like the Cape Flats are. Yeah. People in those communities, not many, but some of them say things like, well, the police isn't here, the army isn't here, these are the people with weapons, and these are the people with power. If we align, or at least look the other way, we get safer streets, way safer streets. And so, for me, like, crime and unemployment are just staggeringly terrible in this country, and a political party that could deal with either of those things would be in power for 100 years.
Yeah, but are we going to find a political party who's actively going to change those issues is another question, because we've been talking about gender-based violence for the longest time. Nothing is changing.
Well, it would be great to have some women in leadership positions in parties. I mean, it staggers me that the most powerful woman in South African politics is still Helen Zille. Like, is it 2006? Like genuinely, is it 2006? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, but my issue is just how brazen criminals have become. I mean, just this past week, we saw a specific transport company in the media again, where allegedly 2 young women were stabbed during their trip. There's been so many complaints about this company. Nothing ever happens. There's campaign after campaign. Why is government not stepping into instances like this? I mean, we saw images where 2 young women are laying on the ground in South Africa after being stabbed, and there's nothing. We're not hearing anything.
The focus has really been about e-tolls.
It's just so brazen.
The focus has really been about e-tolls. Really? You know, having that grandiose show in the middle of the night. Exactly. So
like, you did this to us, and now you're celebrating taking it away like a revolutionary struggle. But it is interesting when you say the brazenness. So it's not nearly as serious and important a crime, but we, as you discussed, but we talked yesterday on the show about how wig snatching is becoming huge in Cape Town and Joburg. People are walking up and down the streets looking, oh, that's a really nice human hair wig, and then they rip it off somebody's head and they run away and they resell it. The fact that is possible, that the streets are so not secured. And then you have Becky Taylor again with his hat making a statement about, oh, we promise things will be better. And they're not. In that town hall where the eNCA one, where he was receiving questions, people were furious with him. And that's because these are people who are looking at the man who has been unable to secure safety for their lives.
are we ready for these elections? I mean, with all the interviews you've done so far, night in and night out, and you're listening to all the different political parties and all the major players, and I suppose everybody else that's on the ground affected by these political parties. Are we ready for the 29th of May?
I think there's two groups of people. There are the ones who really want to see change and who really are excited to cast their vote and to make their mark. And then there are the ones who I've engaged with who just have, like we said earlier, they've lost hope. They see no change, they see nothing happening, and they're not even interested in voting. They haven't even been interested in registering because they just feel like no matter what I do, no matter who I vote for, nothing's going to change. So I really think there's two separate groups here. Those who are really excited at the possibility of something changing, and those who have just given up.
Also, something that I find interesting is we talk so much about national elections, right? But it needs to hit you provincially as well. Do you go for the same party provincially that you're going for nationally? Because provincially, if you go with a Swale Bisimang, or you go with a Panyaza de Sufi, or you go with a Bongani Baloyi, for example, just randomly, that needs to be random. That needs to very random. that needs to be somebody that is really dealing with the water crisis in Hammanskraal. That's dealing with the dilapidated buildings in Johannesburg, for example, Marshall Street. that's dealing with whatever is happening in Vereeniging, because that's another city in this province that we don't talk about. Do you go with the same parties, or do you try and split your vote and see what it does?
Because there's 3 ballots now, right?
Yes.
There's 3, it's different this year.
Yeah, so you've got to make sure you get them all right. I think that what's interesting is that there is a long pattern of South Africans, particularly recently, voting differently between national and provincial, national and local. So that does happen. But what's really interesting that Wayne Sisman, eNCA's election expert who headed up this eNCA Markdata Poll, what he talks about a lot is national leaders are cult figures. So in a national election, often people are voting for the leader, whereas local, they're voting a little bit more for the party's performance in their area, which is quite interesting. So there's been a lot of speculation about whether the Ramaphoria that happened in 2019 and maybe ended Mmusi Maimani's career, whether that will kick back in and boost the ANC's numbers on the 29th of May. Similarly, I mean, guys, John Steenhuisen's approvals, you saw in that poll, he's at 22%. He's 8% less popular than Mmusi Maimane, who respectfully very few people have heard of in the last 4 years.
And after the ad now of Berlin.
Yeah, and you know, we spoke about this on the show last night. So the DA is incredibly proud about how many views their ad got, even though it was a terrible. They were like, oh, but the view count. And I said on the show, I was like, do you know how many other creative ways you could have gone about getting a high view count ad? Like, I'm just going to give this to you for free, Democratic Alliance, because I know you've blocked me on Twitter. Wow. And I also know that I've been blacklisted for more than 5 years from interviewing your people. So here's a free idea for an ad that will do better than the burning of the flag, and people will actually like you. Should an ad suggesting to Tinder that they have a new filter where you only match with people if they've registered to vote? Should an ad imagining that, a comedy satirical ad, I promise you it'll do better than burning the flag, and people will actually think that you have a sense of humor, and you might get some youth voters. Do that instead. Just see what happens. Just see what happens.
Oh my God.
Just see what happens.
Honestly, the landscape of these elections have really made it interesting, I think. But they've also made it difficult. And I think for me, that's the most concerning thing, is that this is more difficult an election than any other. 1994, everybody knew who they were voting for. Yeah. It's like, listen, we're going for the ANC or the PAC because they were the guys that supposedly, freed us. The other elections are just like, why? You know what? It doesn't matter. These, though, especially with independent candidates involved in there as well, who a lot of us don't even know who they are, but they're there nonetheless. And just that thought of having independent candidates, this for me has given me a great deal of anxiety with these elections. Firstly, that they are safe, but secondly, that we actually get the right government in party, even if it is a coalition.
Yeah. But have you streamlined sort of who your top 2 would be, without obviously mentioning it on camera if you're not comfortable?
I don't even want to lie to you. I know that party that I'm going to vote for.
Really?
Now it's
What were the contributing factors?
That I voted for them the last time, but also it's because I'm now putting myself in a position where they need to really convince me to not change my mind. So I'm going with what I know, but you need to convince me to not change my mind. I'm not allowing myself to consider any other option yet. I still got 3 weeks, which sounds like, a very long time, but it's not. But I'm going with what I know, because where I've needed them to perform, I've seen them perform. And that's why for me, provincial selection is of utmost importance. If I can get that right, then in 5 years' time, I'll probably decide if I change or not change. But I've figured out who I want to vote for, and I just hope that they don't do anything stupid like burn a flag to convince me otherwise.
So you've narrowed it down a little bit.
You know who you're going for, Dan?
No, but I do have a not over my dead body list, which is really helpful. 2 dozen. Easily 2 dozen.
Yeah.
But no, so what I find useful when I'm thinking about who I'm going to vote for is a few things. The first one is, do they agree with my principles? So in a very basic way, you need to find a party that agrees with your morals, because if you want to trust somebody with the power that you can give them through your vote, you need to be able to go, when they get into the decision-making moment, that they'll move in a way, they'll act in a way to kind of try and create the country that I want to be a part of. And then you need to, quite frankly, think about who they will go into coalition with. Because if you've got some over my dead body no's, you don't want to vote for a party that then goes into coalition with one of those over my dead body no's. Yeah. So yeah, I think if I had to be brutally honest with myself, and usually, this is just my experience of voting, but usually I'm comfortable, and then I get into the booth and my heart drops and I'm like, oh my God, this is democracy.
Yeah.
Like and I look at the faces and I'm like, if I give you power, even though no one will ever know which one. No. If I give you power, even though no one will ever know that I voted for you, will I be able to live with myself knowing that I gave you that? And I've never changed my mind in the booth, but you go through that last filter of like...
5 years is a long time, guys.
long
To
time.
sit with regret, it's a very long time.
The embarrassment, the quiet embarrassment.
Even the 2 years of local government elections, and the power you have there won't even make you feel better. You would have thought, I gave them power. But yeah, the booth is an intimidating place, but I'm... Definitely. I'm even taking a day off to be at the polls. That's how excited I am to make sure that I'm there. 7 o'clock when they open. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be dressed in my finest. And I'm gonna, yes, it's a whole thing for me. It's a whole thing for me. I've got the power to decide who is going to either decrease my petrol price and not put me in a position where I have to buy a smaller car, or someone who's going to really take that petrol price through the roof and then I have to walk to work every day.
Sure.
But I think it's also important to realize that there's not going to be an instant change.
Yeah.
We need decades of transformation. It's not going to be an easy fix. There's just so many issues in our country, and I think that's something that we need to be mindful of. You know, after the elections, it's not like there's just going to be a snap of the fingers and everything's different.
I think we need to steel ourselves too, because if there's going to be radical change, or at least somewhat significant change, it means that individuals in local and national government who are there through illegal patronage networks, corruption networks, if they lose power, that affects criminal networks' draining of state resources, which means that there won't necessarily be political killings, although in KZN it seems very, very likely because it happens so much, but there's going to be fundamental illegal economy instability if people who are in positions of giving out bread to people who shouldn't give out that bread lose their positions. And so there could be a very, very fraught period after the election, and coalition like fighting is going to be really wild all across the country. So I think that we'll have like this, okay, we voted, and then 3 months of like, what on earth did we just do? And then it'll settle. Then it will settle, I think. Yeah.
29. That's essentially the day that we can only but hope that our futures do change as South Africa for the positive, you know. But yeah, we are going to go through that 3 months, which usually should be honeymoon phase, but it's probably going to be misery phase. But yeah, what we're basically just trying to urge you, you know, as you watch this episode to do is go to the polls. If you've registered, you registered for a reason, go to the polls, mark that spot, put that X on that paper, and if you feel that you've made the decision that you don't really feel comfortable with, don't worry. You've got another 5 years to wait. But yeah, X marks the spot. You know, it's the eNCA podcast with the great Dan Corder. Dan Corder Show, Monday and Tuesday times?
9 p.m. On 403 DSTV, and you can also catch the full episodes if you missed it on the website.
Well, it's been fantastic chatting to you, Dan. We're going to do... Thank you for joining us. We're going to be having a few more of these, you and I, Morena. We're going to get through some of these stats and data points as well. But thank you so much for joining us.